welcome to Mondays with Mom, the podcast where my mom, Leah,
Hi.
and I, Jo, dive into her stories, experiences, and the lessons she's hoping I finally take to heart. My mom has always dreamed of turning her life into a book or a movie, and this podcast is our way of making that dream come true one episode at a time. Right, Mom?
Right, Joey, and thanks for that.
So what are we talking about this week?
Well, I was thinking a couple of nights ago, I was brushing my teeth,
Okay, as
And
one does.
as one does, and I could hear George chuckling and laughing in bed.
Okay.
So I went over to see what he was laughing about, and he was watching a Michael McIntyre reel.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense because Michael McIntyre
So funny.
He's really funny. I actually really enjoy his style of comedy.
Me too.
It's because he's not only funny, but it's good, clean fun.
Yeah.
Now, this particular reel that got me thinking was a reel he had made about how much easier things are these days than they used to be.
Okay, explain.
Well, he was specifically referring to cars, and he was talking about how easy people have it these days and how everything in the car there are a lot of electronics, and you literally have to flick a switch or press a button and things happen.
Okay.
And he got to the one part where he was actually talking about how what we used to have in the good old days were the windows that had this winding up or crank mechanism.
Yeah.
You've seen those before.
Yes.
And
in
he was
old cars.
in old cars. And he was actually saying that this is like a full-on workout, whereas these days people just use their finger.
Yeah.
And that immediately reminded me of a story that I'd like to tell.
Okay.
In fact, it reminded me of a few funny stories.
Yeah.
And most of these stories relate to one particular car.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Sounds very fun.
What I do find interesting is that these days people still refer to windows in the car as in roll up your windows and roll down your windows. And that was specifically to do with that cranking mechanism. Now it's like
It's just
push your window
put
down,
the window down, or push it up, or push it back up. I don't know.
something like that.
Yeah.
Now, just to give everybody a little bit of background into the story, I went to a Greek school in South Africa in an area called Bedford View, which was quite a upmarket area. But I lived in an area that was slightly more middle class. It was called Lombardy East. Now, in those days, our school actually had buses going to certain areas, collecting children. They don't really do that anymore in South Africa these days, private school buses. But this particular school did it for areas where there were a lot of Greek children.
Yeah, I've never been on a school bus before.
No, you haven't. Well, I mean, for outings, but never to collect you from home.
Yeah.
They don't do that anymore.
And also, we did happen to live very close to school.
Oh, yes, we were walking distance from
So
school.
I
You're
wouldn't
right.
have used the bus even if it did exist.
That's true. That's true.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Were the school buses yellow like the American ones in the movies?
No, they weren't actually. They were white. But the buses in Greece that come and fetch children to go to the Greek private schools are yellow.
That's true. I've seen them.
And those are really, really cool. I mean, I've always wanted to be on a bus like that, but for many reasons. One, because there weren't lots of Greek people in our area. And two, because our buses happened to be white.
They were less exciting.
They were less exciting, so no such luck. And one of the reasons why the school ran this bus system is because it was a very expensive Greek private school. And in order to be able to afford the fees, usually parents worked, both parents worked. And they needed to work in order to be able to afford these really exorbitant school fees, especially in those days. So my father at the time, when I first started going to this nice private Greek school, used to drive not a very fancy car because we were middle class, but he drove this yellow Chevrolet. There's your yellow color, Joe.
So
Wasn't
not
a bus, it was a car. And we would often look around because we were in a school where some Greek people there were very wealthy. And some of them used to arrive with these really fancy cars. And we would often look at our car and look at other people's cars and say to our dad, oh, look at that car. That's a fancy BMW or that's a fancy Mercedes. And this was especially in the mornings when some parents would drop off their children. And always our dad would sit us down and we'd start this very serious talk. And he'd say, you know what? You need to not care about what car you drive. You need to care about what kind of human being you are.
I mean, that's a good life lesson.
So I definitely agree that the car you drive doesn't define who you are. But there are times where people push this slightly to the limit. And growing up, I felt that I got pushed to my limits here and there. In the particular area that we lived, which was called Lombard East, there weren't a lot of Greek people, but there were a couple of Greek families and everyone knew each other. We were all friendly and kind of would help each other out. So we eventually created, or my parents created with their friends and neighbors, the ones that were Greek, a kind of
A carpool system?
a carpool system, or what we would call it, a lift club.
A lift club sounds nicer.
Yes, we would call it a lift club. And what would happen is whoever available to drop children off at school or to fetch them would take that shift and then take children back home.
Sounds good to me.
So we had a good system going. And what eventually happened is other non-Greek people in the area who were also happened to send their children to the same school kind of jumped onto our bandwagon, if we want to call it that, or our lift club, and would join in because Greek parents, as we know, are highly overprotective and their darlings would never be walking to school or riding a bicycle to school exactly. But a lot of the South African children in the area, the parents would kind of say, okay, off you go and I'll see you when you come home on your bicycle or when you walk. And the people that lived in our area would frequently kind of join us because they knew they could get a lift home. So it was quite nice.
Yeah, nice.
And what seemed to happen most times is my parents, either my mom or dad, would take the morning shift, so dropping us all off at school in the morning. And that was easy because you would kind of just drop and go. The parents didn't even necessarily have to drive into the school. They could drop you outside the gates and go. So that was an easy one, and off they'd go to work. And then the slightly more challenging one was when someone would come and fetch us directly after school. So school would finish at around 2:15 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And one of the parents, which was usually one of my parents' friends and neighbors, would come collect us at that time. And then my parents would take the next shift, which was the after extramural shift, which would tend to be around about 4:30 or 5.
Yeah, around 5.
So there was always a parent coming to fetch. And fortunately, or unfortunately for me, the person that would come fetch in the afternoons had the crankiest car.
The crankiest? What do you mean?
I needed to call it cranky because this car, it was a very, very old model of a Ford Cortina. It could have been a 68 model. It could have been a 66 model. And it was driving us around in the 70s and 80s, and it sounded like it was a 60s car. In fact, it sounded like it was a 40s car. It would make these weird noises, and it would squeak. It was white, and it wasn't a very good-looking car.
Okay.
And what would happen is we would be fetched in this Ford Cortina if we were finishing school at 2:15. So the school bell marking the end of day would ring at 2:15, but it didn't mean that you would be out at the car ready to go at 2:15.
Well, yeah, I mean, rarely were you out at 2:15 because you just have left class at 2:15 and then you're getting everything in your bag and then you're still talking to your friends and then you're all walking slowly together to the front of the school.
Exactly. And if you're like me and you get a bit distracted and you're a bit ADD, then you might realize you've forgotten something and go back to the classroom. And my parents' friend who would come and pick us up would be very annoyed because he would get there at exactly 2:15. And he expected us to be there by the latest 2:20. And I would kind of be rushing quite often because I was a little bit scared of this friend of my parents when he got upset.
Yeah.
He was really, really a nice man.
Yeah.
and a good friend of my parents. But when he got upset, and he obviously had this heavy Greek accent, and when he got upset, instead of swearing, he would exclaim, as someone would exclaim these days, like, oh my goodness, or oh my gosh, or oh my God. He would scream out, Jesus Christus, you late again. And I would be trying to avoid this and didn't want to upset this man. Anyway, the other thing that would happen, which I found a little bit challenging because this car was a little bit cranky, and I'll go into the details of that just now, is that he seemed to always find these parking spots that were next to the rich parents. Now, when I say the rich parents, I mean, at the school I went to, there were some wealthy parents, and then there were some parents that there is no other word to describe them other than stinking rich. And what I mean by that, by stinking rich, is there was a particular child that would arrive, and somehow this child also would delay long enough for me to get to the car. So he also wasn't a child that was on time. He was being driven to and from school in a Rolls Royce.
Wow.
But he wasn't being driven by his father.
Yeah.
He was being driven by a chauffeur.
Wow.
And there would be the chauffeur that was dressed up in this little outfit with a cap. And when this little boy would come, and this little boy was substantially younger than I was, because when all this was happening and I was aware of it, I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Before then, I probably didn't even notice what car we were driving.
Yeah. Makes
So
sense.
as a teenager, I would arrive late as usual, but I would arrive to see this little child arriving at his Rolls Royce. The chauffeur would get out, he would doff his cap and then open the back seat for the child, and the child would go in, and there I was in my cranky Ford Cortina. Now, I'll just give you a little bit of background on this cranky Ford Cortina, because we had this system. The Greeks in South Africa all stuck together. And one of the exciting things that would happen is we would go once a week to a part of Johannesburg that was not the best part of Johannesburg, but we would all congregate there on a Sunday night, and we would go to a movie theater that had been booked out for us, and we would watch Greek movies.
Oh, that sounds fun.
And this was really a highlight. We would all enjoy it. But getting back to the car, the area wasn't really nice. And on more than one occasion, the owner of the Cortina had come to Greek movies with us. And what he would do, and he would tell us that he was going to do this, is he would leave his keys in the car.
Why?
Leave his car unlocked in the hope that somebody would steal the car, because then he could claim the insurance and get a better car.
Okay. Did it work?
Nobody wanted this car. He did all these things. He would leave the window open a little bit. He would leave a door unlocked. He tried and tried and tried to entice someone to steal this car, and nobody would steal this car.
Okay.
So that's going to give you a slight indication. And the car, and the reason why the car reminded me of the Michael McIntyre is because this car in all its glory definitely used the wind-up window system, except other than on the driver's side, it only had one handle to wind up windows.
So what did you guys do?
So there were another 3 windows. So what we would do is we would fight over the handle.
Okay.
On a hot day, we would be screaming, "You've hogged it long enough, give it to me," and we'd be pulling it from each other.
That's so funny.
And then if suddenly it would rain, that would be the worst, because then you'd be screaming, your hair was going to get ruined, "Hand me the handle," and people would be fighting over the handle. I mean, it was really, really
That's
funny.
really funny, yeah.
So I had decided that in order to save face and to not cause trouble to the dear soul who drove this car around, because he was very kind to come and fetch us and a really nice guy, I had come up with this really good technique, because you were allowed to wear earrings at school.
Uh-huh.
And so I used to get into the car. I mean, he must have thought I was completely insane. Get into the car and say, "Oops, I've dropped my earring," every single time. And I would bend down and duck and be fiddling on the floor trying to pick up my earring until we had driven out of school. And then miraculously the earring would be found, and I would sit up again. And that was my way of not being seen
Okay.
in the car while I was driving out of school.
Uh-huh. That's
And
a good technique.
The thing about it is, though, which is quite interesting, and maybe I was then realized that I was a little bit of a spoiled Greek brat is because other people in the area would ask to catch a lift with us.
Okay.
So other children from school that would live in the area, and one of them that I remember clearly because a lot of the girls at school thought he was so hot, and he was this really, really nice looking, nice big guy
Yeah.
who happened to be captain of the rugby team.
Ooh, okay.
And he lived in Lombardy East. And he would often join us. And even
Yeah.
though his parents were substantially wealthier than mine, I remember our house was a nice house with a nice swimming pool and a garden, but his had like 3 swimming pools and a tennis court, and his house was a double-story house.
So he would drive with you guys and have to fight over the window rolling
So
thing.
he would be fighting over the window rolling thing because his other option was to either walk home or to get onto a bicycle home.
So the car was a better option.
So he felt this car was a better option. He didn't seem to be very embarrassed. The one day, which was absolutely hysterically funny now, but when I think about it, we actually, going home, there was a dip. So what I mean by dip is you would go down a hill and then up a hill and then turn to your right to start heading home. And this hill going down and up was very, very steep. And as you remember, Jo, that hill was called the Sandringham Dip.
Mm-hmm. Well, it still existed.
Still existed, but do you remember that frequently at the bottom of the dip or at the top of the dip, I don't know, policemen and
There were a lot of like camera traps.
there were camera traps later on, but before that, before they even could set up camera traps, they would often have police, what do we call them? Police blockades, police roadblocks.
Yeah.
Where they would stop you and ask to see your driver's license and all sorts of questions. And we got stopped once to check if the
Okay.
car was roadworthy.
Yeah.
And what they asked us to do, and it happened to be on a day that we had this rugby guy, Neville, in the back of the car with us. And needless to say, the car was back heavy.
Yeah.
And we were all in the car, and this policeman or traffic officer asked the driver of the car to please pull up the handbrake, which he did. And he kind of kept his foot on the foot brake. And the traffic officer said to him, now lift your foot off the brake. And he kind of kept trying to keep one toe on the brake, try keep something on the brake.
How come? What was going to happen?
The minute he took his foot off the brake, we just rolled backward down
no.
the hill.
Oh, no.
And then my best is, if that wasn't bad enough, the car was now at the bottom of the hill. It didn't have the momentum that we had when we came from school to go. It couldn't go up the hill.
Oh, my word.
The car couldn't. We all had to get out the car with the rugby player and walk 100 meters up the hill and meet the car at the top of the hill. Okay, so I wasn't criticizing this car falsely.
Okay.
I definitely wasn't. The other funny story with this car is on one of the occasions where all of us were in the car, and it happened that this rugby player was in the car with us as well. Let me not call the poor guy just a rugby player. I say that because a lot of people admired him for being head of the rugby team. And we were all fighting over the window handle, as we used to do. And we all knew each other very well. So we're like screaming and bickering. And he got annoyed and he said, will you guys just stop? And as he said stop, he slammed his foot on the car floor for effect. And boy, did it have an effect.
What effect?
Because his foot went right through the car.
Oh, my word, you're kidding.
It left a hole in the ground. So his foot was actually on the road. You could actually see the road. And apparently, I actually looked it up. It's a thing. It can happen to old rusty cars.
Oh, my word. Oh.
So
It's insane.
That was completely insane. The next thing that the story gets even funnier is eventually, on one of these many attempts to have this car stolen.
Okay. Yeah.
It was actually stolen.
Oh, all right.
And we were all, I promise you, the guy that owned the car was celebrating. No one celebrated more than me. We were thrilled. We knew now we're going to get another car. We're going to be driving in a car that's kind of not necessarily worthy of being next to the Rolls Royce, but at least we can hold our heads up high. I don't have to lose any more earrings. And 3 days later, the police raided a township that was in the area, and they found it.
Oh my word.
And they returned it to him. But the problem was it was missing a door.
Oh, so they used it for parts.
They used it for parts. So the driver's door was gone.
Wow, okay.
Now, if anything could get any worse in this car, and because the poor man was not given the insurance money and he didn't really want to go spend lots of money on a car, he did what any self-respecting Greek man would do.
Yeah.
He went to the local junkyard and found a door.
Okay.
And okay, he managed to find a door that could kind of fit the car, but it wasn't the right color. It was red.
Oh my word.
It was red.
So completely mismatched.
So there was a white car with a red door. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, so already this was bad. Now, the Rolls Royce was looking more and more tempting, and this car was looking more and more sad. And on one of these occasions of me being me,
Yeah, being like late.
and arriving late, I approached the car, and he was so annoyed with me. He screamed. I mean, this was the loudest Jesus Christus I'd heard in a long time.
Oh my word.
I was so scared. He screamed, and for effect, he said, "Don't make me wait." And he took his car door and he slammed it with all his might. And this is now the red car door, which wasn't designed for this car,
Yeah.
which had been fitted on, retrofitted, and it fell off. The door fell off.
Like off its hinges.
Off its hinges, it stood upright for about 2 seconds and then just toppled over to the side.
Oh my word. Okay.
So we left it behind.
Next to the Rolls Royce.
Oh, Lord, don't remind me. We left this door behind on school grounds and we left.
That's crazy.
I think I lost both my earrings that day and maybe a hair ponytail as well. I stayed
on
down.
like the ground where you could see the road on the floor.
I had to stop losing earrings because if I had to drop my earring now this time, it would go onto the road and I would genuinely lose it. I promise you.
That is so funny.
And then the dear soul eventually replaced the door again because he had to. He couldn't drive without a door. And this time he found a blue door.
Okay, so still not matching.
Still not matching, but at least it had the Greek vibe, blue and white, like the Greek flag, a white car with one blue door.
It's so funny.
Oh, Lord.
That's crazy.
That car, I swear to you. And sometimes I think that I have to thank that car for who I became.
Okay.
Because just because of that car, I swear to you, Jo, I joined every possible extramural that existed so I didn't have to leave and go home at 2:15. I played netball. I played hockey. I did Greek dancing. I actually didn't do swimming. The car wasn't that bad for me to do swimming. But I did volleyball. I played hockey. I did public speaking. I used to pretend to do karate and just go watch the karate coach because I thought he was hot.
You did choir.
I did choir.
So basically, you did practically everything that the school offered so that you did not have to go home at 2:15, is what I'm hearing.
I think except for swimming, because I was worried that possibly I didn't look very hot in that Saheti swimming costume. It wasn't a good swimming costume.
No, I don't think anyone looked hot in that costume. I don't think anyone looks hot in that costume.
I think by the time you went to that school, Jo, they had improved the costume. It was almost like the door handles, like the window handles going up. By then, they had kind of decided that women actually have legs. They're not just these square figures. It's the same as now they realized you press a button, the costumes had actually improved.
I thought you said you press a button, the costume's gone.
That would be funny.
So, Mom, I think on that note, what are the life lessons that we can take away from these stories?
Okay. Well, I would think probably the most important lesson is do not slam your car door when you're angry.
That's a good one. Especially if your car door was not originally fitted to your car.
Especially then. Then I would say the second lesson would probably be know that nobody wants to steal a cranky car. If you don't want your car, probably no one else wants it either.
And maybe don't do like insurance schemes. It's probably better if you stay away from those.
Probably better. And then I would say, if you are driving a really cranky car that you're trying to get stolen, try not to park next to the most luxury car around.
Like, don't make it super obvious.
Don't make it super obvious. And, of course, a very important lesson is don't judge a person by the car they drive.
And also, don't worry about the kind of car that you drive, but worry about the content of your character.
Oh, the kind of person you are. Yes, your
Kind of person you
grandfather
are.
would be very proud.
I'm trying to score points.
You definitely are scoring points. I'd probably think the final lesson
Yeah.
would be that if you are driving a very cranky car, don't do any things like sing the song, "If you're happy and you know it, stamp your feet." And if you do, stamp them really gently.
That's so funny. Yeah, I think those are some good lessons.
Good lessons. And I think it's time for our gratitude. So definitely from my side, I can say I'm grateful for electric windows.
I can say that I'm grateful that I never had to fight over the rolling mechanism for different windows
That is
in a car.
definitely something to be grateful for. I would also say I'm really grateful that I was born Greek and I didn't have to ride a bike or walk to school, that I had overprotective parents that wanted to drive me to school.
Yeah, I'm glad and I'm grateful that your weird, cranky car experiences led you to have all these nice stories for this podcast.
That's a good thing to be grateful for, Jo. And lastly, I think we should be grateful for fathers and grandfathers that teach us important life lessons.
Agreed.
And on that note, I'd like to say thank you to everyone once again for listening.
Yes, thank you guys for listening. And if you're enjoying the podcast, we'd really appreciate it if you could subscribe if you haven't already.
And we're also really grateful that we've managed to reach so many people worldwide. I think we've hit every single continent except for Antarctica.
Yes, it's really exciting. So thanks again, everyone. And we'll see you guys next week.
Bye.